Hey everyone, we'll just get started in just a minute. Thanks for joining. All right, so we are 2 minutes past the half hour. Ikra, do you want to kick us off with some introductions?
Yes. Okay. Well, hi everyone. I'm Ikra. I'm the new coordinator for the Harvard and Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center site for the New England Mental Health Technology Transfer Center. Please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat box. Now, I just want to review a few housekeeping items before we begin. Participant microphones will be muted on entry. If you have any questions during the event, please use the chat. This session is being recorded and it will be emailed to all the participants once available. If you have any questions after this session, please email newengland@mhttcnetwork.org. At the end of the month, we will send you a certificate of completion that you can submit to your particular board for continuing education credit. Please contact Fisher at c4innovates.com for more information on CE after the event. This slide provides a description for our disclaimers for MHTTC. The MHTTC network uses affirming, respectful, and recovery-oriented language in all activities. That language is strengths-based and hopeful, inclusive and accepting of diverse cultures, genders, perspectives, and experiences, healing-centered and trauma-responsive, inviting to individuals participating in their own journeys, person-first and free of labels, non-judgmental and avoiding assumptions, respectful, clear, and understandable, consistent with our actions, policies, and products. With that, it is my pleasure to hand it over to Kelsey for introductions.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks everyone for introducing yourself in the chat. It's great to see we have some folks from our Massachusetts network here and also outside of it. I always love to see the kind of breadth of folks who can join us. So I'm here to introduce Abbe. Abbe Duke is a longtime peer specialist in New York State and the recovery specialist and trainer supervisor at the OnTrackNY initiative at the Center for Psychiatric Innovations. So Abbe brings a decade of experience working on a peer specialist to a variety of settings throughout New York State, as well as in training and technical assistance work for the New York State Office of Mental Health and for OnTrackNY. And specifically over the past year, we've had the pleasure of working with Abbe and her team as far as leading a peer cohort for us in Massachusetts here. I think we've learned a lot about how to really support peer specialists in this role that I think for a lot of places is fairly new, and how to really be integrating those onto these recovery-oriented and really supportive coordinated teams for early intervention in psychosis. So that's what we're here to talk about today, to get more information about how to really not just have a peer specialist on a team, but integrate them as part of the whole treatment for early psychosis. So Abbe, I'll hand it off to you, but also to everyone, please, I think this is especially an interactive call. We want to hear from you. So please feel free to speak up. But yeah, thanks. Take it away, Abbe.
Excellent. Good morning, all. I'm very excited to be here and talk about my favorite thing, which is peer specialists. So I see some people introducing themselves in the chat box. That is so helpful. I love to know who's in the room, what roles we hold, where we're sitting. And as Kelsey mentioned, we are hoping for a lot of interactivity today. So if you are coming here hoping to sort of sit back and listen and learn, sorry, we want to hear from you too. And those of you who have joined us in peer specialist calls know that all of our voices are so much nicer than any one of our voices. So we really look forward to having some community dialogue in here. So I've done a tiny bit of an intro thanks to Kelsey. I'll just share a bit. So I do work for the OnTrackNY initiative at the Center for Practice Innovations, and that is the approach to peer specialist work that we're going to be talking about, which is the one that is within the OnTrackNY model, and that is currently happening in 30 teams, almost over 30 teams throughout New York State. We're going to spend some time this morning. I will take you through our website and show off our different resources for peer specialists because those are publicly available to anyone who's interested. If you have the internet, you can access our resources. And while they were developed specifically for peer specialists in OnTrackNY and therefore coordinated specialty care, there's a lot of stuff that's really helpful for peer specialists in other roles. But we do want to highlight and shout out that these are for peer specialists in coordinated specialty care because we don't necessarily get enough people talking about the work that we do here, and we're excited for this opportunity to amplify them and share them a little bit. So as you are introducing yourself in the chat box, it's great to hear your name, your role, where you're coming from. I'm also curious to hear, and feel free to use the chat box or just raise hand, if anyone brought questions today that you were hoping to have answered by the time we leave, because then we can make sure to take some time and dialogue on them. We will be ending with a Q&A, but it's great to know from the beginning what people are looking to learn, what elements of integrating peer specialists into coordinated specialty care feel most important to you. So I'm going to take a moment and a breath and a sip and let y'all hit the chat box or raise your hand to share the questions you'd like answered. Lauren, come on up.
Hi, Abby. Nice to meet you. I used to be a team leader with OnTrackNY up in Albany, the Parsons site. So I think very highly of your guys' program. I was hoping that you might speak today to having peers attend the weekly rounds or team meetings and how you think about the amount of maybe clinical information or that's discussed among the clinical team and how to kind of balance that with some of the principles of peer work.
Most excellent question. Thank you so much. And we love having OnTrackNY in the room. Okay, any other questions? I also see in the chat box, we've got Jacob looking forward to anything ACT specific. So welcome in the room. I'm always glad to have some ACT teams in the room. I will share that part of my work experience was as a peer specialist on an assertive community treatment team in New York State. And so while, again, we are going to be really focusing in on coordinated specialty care in the OnTrackNY model, it is an interdisciplinary team working with people who are working with people out in the community, out living their lives, or people who have maybe received mental health diagnoses that are considered to be under the umbrella term of what is SMI. I think there's a lot of similarities between our two teams. So I think that there'll be a lot of benefits for those who are ACT providers or interested in learning more about ACT care, but just really remembering that coordinated specialty care is a model that was specifically designed for young people between the ages of 16 and 30, or those, sorry, within OnTrackNY, it's young people within the ages of 16 to 30 who are within the first 2 years of having the experience of emerging mental health experiences and seeing, hearing things that others don't. So there is a little bit more of a focus and a target in who we are working with, but having served on an ACT team as well, there's so much cross-pollination. There's so much that happens that I think really is appropriate for both. So I hope that you're able to come away. I think that our tools, while developed for CSC, I think are really valuable for ACT. I also think that our manual, our supervision checklists, and all of the things I'm about to show you will be helpful. So any other things we were hoping to learn today? Taking notes. Of course. Hi, Steve. Always going right in for the hard one. Okay. So we can talk a little bit about this, the parameters. We won't go into too much detail, but I'm excited to sort of, when we're thinking about integration, I think our role within documentation is also important. And then we've got Michael in the room. Ooh, issues that may come up with peer specialists with split roles, specifically if you're serving as the peer specialist and also the Cs. So I want to acknowledge that there's coordinated specialty care models that look very different throughout the country. And so for OnTrack New York, it is specifically a standalone role. It is not a shared role. So what we can do is we can talk about the way that peer specialist values can be held regardless and incorporated in, because peer specialists, especially when teams don't necessarily have that supported employment and education specialist role, peer specialists do a lot of job support with people. And so I think it's helpful to think about holding to our peer values while stepping into other elements of the work. And we can definitely take some time to think through that. I also saw Shay with her hand up.
Hi. Sorry, I'm like a little shy, but so I did have a question, but you kind of just answered it. That's why I lowered it. So I'm just really excited to hear more about that.
May I ask which question it was?
It was just like the roles, like, like having the double roles, and then the other question I was gonna ask about was sitting in meetings about, what's the clinical now. Yeah, I was gonna that, so it's like getting answered.
Isn't that what happens? We come into a community, a collective, and we realize that many of our questions are also each other's and that we have some space to dialogue together. Okay. All right. Any final thoughts? Any questions? Not final thoughts, please interrupt me at any moment. Like there is never a chance like this. We want this to be a conversation. So don't feel like this is your only opportunity, but I do want to make some space just in case anyone hasn't shared yet. Okay, perfect. So what I'm going to do now is a little shameless promotion for OnTrack New York. So we at OnTrack New York are really, really proud of the work that we've done regarding the role of peer specialist. It is a process that has grown. OnTrack New York turned 10 years old last year. So it has been a slow process of growth. When OnTrack first became a model of care, peer support was a part of it from the very beginning. Lived experience was a part of it from the very beginning. Dr. Pat Deegan was involved. And so there's always been that perspective, but at the very beginning of OnTrack New York, the idea was that teams would connect with peer support out in the community. And so for the first couple of years that OnTrack New York existed, it was without the role of peer specialist as an internal member. And that became complicated. There was varying access to peer support in the community. There was sort of uncertainty about how to access, and it was an external support. So it wasn't someone who was a part of the team, who was a part of the dialogue. So in 2015, 2016, peer specialists started getting added to OnTrack New York teams. And at that point in time, they were a part-time position. Our teams consist of primary clinicians, outreach and recruitment specialists, or coordinators, supported employment education specialists, team leaders, a psychiatric care provider, and a nurse role. Some of these are full-time positions and some of these are part-time. So when the role of peer specialist was first added, it was added as a part-time role. And for a couple of years, it really sort of built itself up, building relationships with participants. And what we realized at OnTrack New York was two things. First, okay, we're onto something here. This is really a role that is thriving. At this moment in time, there was more funding for peer specialists throughout mental health programs. And so we really saw that this was a service within the team that was really valuable. And at the same time, we saw that having it be a part-time role made it really challenging for talented people to step into this work. They were either doing those split roles that we're going to talk a little bit about today, where they were only part-time with our program and working in other spaces part-time, or they were working part-time and sort of having to do other work to supplement their income. And what happened was we lost a lot of talented people to other work. And so what we wanted to do at OnTrackNY was really invest in this position and make it a full-time, fully integrated role. And so in 2021, we were able to bring in peer specialists full-time on all of our teams. And since then, it has only grown. So now that we know a little bit about the lay of the land, I am going to introduce you all to the OnTrackNY website. Bear with me, we're going to look at it together because there are just some really, really helpful things for anyone interested in learning more about peer specialists. And so what I have done here is I'm just sharing my screen so you can see our website, and I opened us up to our video library screen. So if you were to go to OnTrackNY.org, and scroll down, you'll see some of our videos, and you can click see more videos. If you do that, it will bring you to this page. I'll also drop this link in the chat box once I stop sharing. And what I really wanted to show here is, well, firstly, we have some phenomenal videos featuring OnTrackers that I think are really great. And so yeah, take your time, enjoy them. But what I'm here to show you is something that we are so ecstatic about, which is these final 3 videos. We just recently released our Peer Specialist Introductory Training modules. These are huge. These are brief videos. They are interactive learning modules that people can do on their own time. They take about 10 to 12 minutes each to go through and learn about the OnTrackNY Peer Specialist approach. So I strongly encourage anyone, if you've got a moment, go in, look through them, learn a little bit. You're going to hear from a variety of OnTrackNY peer specialists. You're also going to hear from OnTrackers and graduates from our program. And they're just pretty cool little interactive things that anyone can contact with and really learn. So we're thrilled these are here. We're also thrilled that they're publicly available. And I'm really excited to say that within New York State, where we are based, these modules are also available in our learning management system. And what we've been able to do with them there is get credit. So peer specialists are getting continuing education credits for viewing this module towards their peer specialist certification. So if you work in a state that has peer specialist certifications, I just want to sort of make a plug that we should start building content and material that is eligible for those hours because we ask that all of our peer specialists in OnTrackNY get certified through the state within the first year of hire. So we're really excited to be building up our capacity to offer continuing education credits for this role. So again, OnTrackNY.org, video library, peer specialist, chapter 1, 2, and 3. If you have 10 minutes, check out one of them. Just get a little taste. You'll want more. I feel comfortable saying that. I will also say that we are having more modules come out as we move. We are making a module for team members around the role of peer specialists. We are making a module on supervising peer specialists. We are so excited to be stepping into this new style of learning, and also really, really proud and excited that they're publicly available, that any person who is interested can go and view these and learn a little bit more about the role. While I'm here, I will also just say we're not here to talk about it today, but these shared decision-making modules also rock. And were developed in partnership with an expert steering committee that consisted of OnTrackNY graduates, OnTrackNY participants, OnTrackNY providers, and they're really powerful. So enjoy, just have fun here. We're here to learn. We got all this fun content for you. So that's our video library. Excuse my scrolling because I have one more thing I want to show you on this website. And so if you were to go to our menu, you go to get involved. Nope, don't go to get involved that way, y'all. Go to get involved and click this little arrow. Sorry, I really should have practiced this. Okay, and now we're on our peer specialist page. This is the link I will also drop in the chat box for you all. This is where all of our peer specialist tools are available. You can also be directed to this page if you go to the MapNet website. So good news if you don't want to do all the things I just did, just go to the MapNet website and click on it. And when you get here, you will see a couple of things that I really want to direct your attention to. So the first one is our manual. This is a new revised manual for peer specialists. It was released last year. filled with information. My recommendation for those who are curious about our manual, just go to the table of contents. I acknowledge people are not going to read this 45-page manual, but if you go to the table of contents, it will show you all of the different sections of the manual, all of our frequently asked questions, and you can really use that to just like visit the pieces that are most interesting to you or feel most relevant to your work. And I got to say, those FAQs are not specific to OnTrackNY. They are experiences of peer specialists. So if you are curious about those frequently asked questions, I would imagine there will be some stuff that's come up for you. We also have our participant peer specialist agreement, which is a cool tool that was co-created with OnTrackNY peer specialists around some of the tricky conversations to have. What we're talking about today at peer specialist integration is this idea that we are a part of a clinical treatment team, but we are not clinical treatment providers. And so there's this tension in our role where we really need to make sure that we're always making the young people we're supporting aware of our role as a part of the team, aware of our responsibilities, and really truthfully aware of the power dynamic that is interrupting our ability to be truly peer with someone. We are a staff person. We do hold power in this relationship. And so that participant peer specialist agreement tool can be helpful. We have OnTrack Maps, which is our flagship tool. This is a tool that was developed by Sasha Altman de Bruhl, the creator of T-Maps. He developed a version specific to OnTrack called OnTrack Maps. Again, super cool tool. If you're just interested, you want a little taste, just open that tool up. Take some time reviewing it. It's filled with thoughtful questions. The intention is that peer specialists will use this tool themselves, but will also share it with participants. Obviously, we're peer specialists. We're not recommending stuff that we haven't thought of ourselves. So we're map making for ourselves. And then if people are interested, we're going through the map making process with them. Lastly, we have the transformation timeline. That is a tool developed around self-disclosure for peer specialists to use to consider. Self-disclosure is a really tricky part of our work, and it is fluid. It's always changing. The parts we are cool with, the parts we want to keep to ourselves. And so the transformation timeline is just a tool that peer specialists can use to consider as they navigate self-disclosure and mutual disclosure in their relationships with participants. Then the final part, and then I will stop this shameless plug. But we also want to share our supervision checklists. Peer specialists and peer specialists on multidisciplinary teams are almost always supervised by a clinical provider. Might not be the case 100% of the time, but often that is the case. And so since we are being supervised by people who have not held the position that we hold, it's complicated. And there are more and more supports for supervisors, but we found this checklist to be a really helpful place. There is a version for peer specialists. There is a version for team leaders. It's not used for everybody. Not everyone wants a checklist for their supervision, but there's really thoughtful questions in there that I can urge everyone to consider at some point, particularly the remaining peer section. Okay, so I'll drop those links. Questions about our materials or accessing them before we move on?
I'd just like to say I read your manual a couple of times. I read the old version and the updated version, and it's superior to anything I've read. I use it as a guideline while I work. It's really filled with multiple things that you can, that I never thought of, how to interact. So thank you for sharing that publicly.
Your check's in the mail, Mike, for that. I really appreciate that. No. So I just want to say, this is a manual that was developed through OnTrackNY. I was very grateful to be able to play a role in putting this information together, but it stands on the shoulders of our history. These are not new ideas. This is not an approach built by OnTrackNY. This is an approach of peer support that we have been doing as a community for ages, that we tried to sort of take what we can and bring it into the coordinated specialty care. But we stand on the shoulders of all that came before us and of the consumer, survivor, and ex-patient movement that led to this being developed. Thank you. All right. So Now we are going to do just a little bit of time, next 15 minutes or so, going through a couple of slides. Just to, well, for those of you who wanted to sit back and learn, this is your moment. We will be covering some OnTrackNY intro slides. If you are interested in more, I will just share that this is from our intro training deck. And I believe on the MapNet website, you can find the recorded training. So this we did in June of last year, and that is available. So you're only going to get a little taste of it today, and we'll go a lot deeper into dialogue than we did last time. But I do just want to plug that that is available for you.
It might, it might not be publicly on the website. I'll look to see if we have that link public, but email me if you're interested. I'll put my email in the chat. We're happy to share.
Excellent. Thank you, Kelsey. Yes, always correct me. I just say stuff sometimes. So often it feels incorrect. So in our general introduction training, we do offer a variety of topics that we are not going to be covering in depth today, but we are going to be really introducing the role of peer specialists within the team and talking a little bit more about support. So we're going to be staying in the beginning part of this agenda today. I just like to level set. We had some great dialogue. People have shared some questions that really show that we're here today because we acknowledge that this is a role that is different than others. We know that. We're not here trying to sort of say like, how are we not clinical providers? Like, we get that we are not clinical providers, but I do like to sort of return to language for a moment. What does it mean to be peer? We talk about it a lot. We talk about being peer, remaining peer, peer specialist, all of that. And so if we look it up, it says a peer is one that is equal standing with another. In our work, there's sort of this way of being peer within the mental health system that makes it a job. That also it really holds to being an identity of being a person who's been psychiatrically labeled. And when we think about what it means to be peer, it's not about a job, and nor is it about psychiatric labeling. What a peer is really at its core is a relationship. And a relationship that exists between two people that are of equal standing. This work is built on rejecting power over others, on rejecting the idea that we know what is happening to someone. We are not on this team to say, oh, this happened to me and that's what's happening to you. Oh, I know what's going on with this person because I've had this experience. At times we may feel the instinct to say those things, don't get me wrong. But really the idea is that we are building these relationships in which we know ourselves. And the person in front of us, we trust them to know themselves and to learn themselves. And we're really always striving to build relationships where as much as possible within the confines of our role, we are of equal standing with those we are supporting. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later when we get into the themes of the role. But equal standing means that we receive support as well as give it. And that's different. That's different than the way that other people work on our team. And so I like to sort of call that into the conversation for us. Okay, so just take a moment, drink it in. This is a new slide that was not featured in our presentation last year. And so I just want to give a moment to our history. We didn't just show up on Teams one day. People fought for their liberation for generations. People have fought against the labels placed upon them, the limitations of their civil liberties. All of these things are what led to peer specialists existing. And when we think about ourselves exclusively as a role within the mental health system without taking the time to honor our history and the fighting that it took to get us in the room, we are missing a part of what we're here for. We are not here to make treatment nice for people, to make programs fun for people. We might do that sometimes, but that is not our intention. We are here to hold space for individuals as they are, to break down the idea that these psychiatric labels that have been placed upon us define us. that these things that we experience differently than other people, that they are deficits, that they are a problem to be solved. We are here to lead with our lived experience, with the things that we've been through, to show that it is not the barrier to success that many is that to really sort of question and check in about what we believe, what biases we hold, what understandings we have about individuals who have been psychiatrically labeled and individuals who identify as having a disability. And the thought that they are those who are in need of services, in need of support, and not those who are just as capable of giving as receiving. Really, we want to spend a second here. So with that, I'm going to give y'all a little sneak peek of some of the work that we're doing. And so I'm going to share a really brief video that we have in our new module that is not yet available. I'm going to share one of our videos so that you can learn just 30 seconds to learn a little bit more about our history. Bear with me. I'm going to have to click on buttons when I share my screen. Okay, you can see it. You're going to play video.
The mutual support that later developed into the profession of peer support began during the consumer survivor ex-patient movement. This movement had been organizing to protect the rights of people who had been psychiatrically labeled. Part of that organizing work involved supporting each other, often as an explicit alternative to the formal mental health system. Although the role of peer support has since developed into a profession within the mental health system, it still retains a focus on rights, total rejection of coercion, and mutuality.
Cool. Okay. Thank you all for joining with me for that. That's very exciting. We can't wait for those modules to be available. But you can get a little bit more of it today if you just visit ontracknyorg.org/video library and view our peer specialist modules. Okay. Again, cell over. So now we're going back to our slide deck.
In this training, you'll learn about the critical theme.
Pause. Excuse me for one moment. Now the video is continuing without me. Thank you for bearing with me. I am back. Just a slight technical issue on my end, but we're back. Okay, so back to our slide deck. So again, we are on a place where you are viewing a slide that you can learn more about how we talk about this quote in our training if you were to visit our recording. But where I really want us to be is I just want us to spend a moment here. Anti-oppression and peer specialist work. Here we are going to do a bit of an activity. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go through this slide, talk about it for a moment or two, and then I want us each to take a few minutes of reflection and answer these questions in front of us. So what we want to do is we want to consider how peer specialists and all of us can bring anti-oppression into our work more meaningfully. Part of being a peer specialist is bringing all of ourselves, good and bad, into our work, and really considering the impact of the identities we hold and the background we come from for ourselves and for those that we are supporting. And this is something that all members of the coordinated specialty care team should, or really all people working within this system should take some time and consider. And so for a lot of you, this might be a place that you've spent a lot of time. You've done a lot of reflection on your identity. You bring it into your work every day. Commend you. It is hard to do. So for you, this might be a really easy practice. For some of us, these might be harder questions to answer. And so if you have pen and paper, if you've got your phone, if you just want to close your eyes and take some time for reflection, I would like for each of us to take 5 minutes and write down or think about the answers to these. Who we are. How do we define ourselves? How do we identify? What are the words that come up when we think, who am I? Where do we sit in the hierarchy and in the system of the mental health care? Are we someone who is a supervisor? Are we someone who is a psychiatric care provider? Are we someone who's a recipient of services? Where does that put us in the hierarchy of the system that we exist within? And what have those experiences taught us? How do we consider ourselves, our families, our health, and the other domains of our lives? What words do we use to describe them? What meaning do they hold? Are they something that gives us privilege and strength? Are they something that has left us feeling disadvantaged or marginalized? What belief systems do we hold around them? And then lastly, what systems have we touched? In what ways? And how has that impacted us? Whether it is stepping into a system as a provider, as a family member, and as a person. And that whether it is the mental health system that we are all a part of, what is called the justice system, really think through what systems have we touched and how has that impacted us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to encourage people to go off camera, and I'm going to set a 5-minute timer for us. I will put those questions in the chat box. And I ask for each of us to take a moment to really ponder and consider what those identities mean and how we might. We are not going to be expected to share back. This is a practice in reflection, not a practice in open sharing. So with that, I am going to share the screen so that I don't have to do that. And I will see you all at 12:12. And we're back. All right. Thank you all for taking a moment to ponder who you are, what you carry with you into the room. I will just add that a part of what peer specialists strive to do is really not just acknowledge who we are, but acknowledge again the power and privilege that we may hold, and the power and privilege that we absolutely do hold as providers on a team, regardless of our other identities, when we are working with someone that is a part of our relationship. And so we see it as a part of our job to acknowledge it, to call it out, to call it in, to make it present, and to talk about power dynamics, because power is always in the room with us, whether or not we want it to be, whether or not we cannot talk about it all day long. That doesn't actually make it not present. And so as peer specialists in our efforts to be authentic and transparent in relationships, we do always want to call that piece in. So should anyone be interested, I will open the floor up if people want to sort of talk a little bit about how that felt for them, if this is something you do regularly in your work. If this was new, if this is not new. If this is part of your practice professionally that you do often alongside people, you can use the chat box if you'd rather not say it on camera for a recorded webinar. That makes sense. So I will just say for myself that this is not a part of the work that I always did as a peer specialist. This was not a part of my training when I came into the role in 2010. there wasn't much training in 2010, to be fair, but that when we're not bringing this into our practice as peer specialists, and when we are bringing peer specialists onto our teams without considering this part of the work, that is a huge barrier to having us exist as a part of it. Like we can't be in places where we're not talking about who we are, what we've been through. And I'm so grateful to hear that this is a regular part of people's work and an ongoing part of our work. Steve.
Yeah, I think in terms of identity, the thing that has taken me a while to learn, but that I think I've finally gotten a better grasp on, is that, like, even if I was trying to create parallels with myself and people serve, that, like, there is just so much nuance and so much subjectivity that, like, beyond the power dynamic, I wasn't trying to have a power dynamic, but, like, you know, just realizing that, like, the truth of it is that we're all different and there might be parallels, but still, like, everyone's so subjective. So I've, like, really thought a lot about, like, like, in the beginning I used to be like, oh yeah, we have this in common, that in common. And the more it becomes more nuanced. It's like, no, there are differences. There are like it's so much different when people are conveying what they're truly thinking as opposed to just like being in agreement. So I don't know, that's something I've like come to learn better as I've gotten better at the work and kind of let go of the power dynamics. And now it's like, why do you want power at all? Like it doesn't do anything. It's not cool. So yeah. Yeah.
But don't get me wrong, I could talk power dynamics all day. It's a great time. But I do want to be mindful. So we will hear from Eileen.
I just wanted to add to that I think the only time I want to be in a position of power is when I'm using it and leveraging it to help amplify other people's voices and lift them up. So I often have power. The question is, am I using it in a way that's helpful to the people I'm supporting?
Beautiful. Yeah, acknowledging it. It's there, whether or not we want it to be, and how can we use it to serve, and how can we share power? How can we empower? How can we create spaces that are empowering for others? Okay, beautiful. I also just want to chat, if you are not in the chat box, we got some great stuff in there thinking about the impact of trauma, the trauma in this work. We are going to do one more activity, and so I'll give us a bit of an introduction into that activity before we go into breakout rooms. So if you haven't done a breakout room before, you are all already assigned. So once I go through this next slide, it should pop up, join breakout room. Click it. Awesome. Okay. So this next slide is about themes of the work of peer specialists. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to take a moment and do a little understanding check for each of them. These are the 7 themes within the OnTrackNY approach that we really have taken some time to highlight, both in our manual and in our training spaces, and are important conversations to have. And so those themes are mutuality and reciprocity, which is, I think, something that we've talked around but haven't talked explicitly about as much today, which is the idea of giving and receiving, of forming bidirectional relationships, of really truly striving to have mutuality and reciprocity be a part of what we do by giving and receiving support, by being present with someone, by allowing space for people who we are in relationship with to be as they are and for us to be as we are. Taking a learning stance as peer specialists, the beauty of our job is that we know nothing. I love saying that. It's like my favorite part of training. It's like, know nothing. I don't have to know anything. I do not have to have the answer to any question unless it's a question I'm like asking myself. And so I think we're oftentimes socialized into clinical treatment settings by feeling like we need to learn all the jargon and we need to use it so people take us seriously. And like, we don't actually. We need to hold to what we do know and to claim our power and our territory in that way, but also to always be able to say, I don't know what that means. What, can you say that again? Can you explain that to me? And for participants to make sure that we're not going into those relationships saying, I know what's happening here. Ah, yes, this is it. This must be this diagnosis, or you must be having this experience, and I know what that means. We are always learning. What do you think is happening? What feels right to you? What is going on with you? Really always having this attitude of curiosity and a desire to know more deeply, but never trying to claim that knowledge for someone else's experience. In the same vein, the third one is allowing the participant to lead. In rejecting power over, we are never making decisions for someone. We are never saying, okay, great, I'll see you at 4 o'clock. We're going to do on-track maps. Would you like to meet? When do you want to meet? Where do you want to meet? How do you want to meet? Like, what do we want to talk about? Like, really giving someone else that ability to be the leader in our relationship. At times, they might ask for us to step forward and say, it would be really helpful if you would schedule this. And so we're game to that, but we always want to make sure that we're first offering the opportunity for someone else to make those decisions for our relationship. Fourth, this is my favorite. Well, those of you assigned to this room, like, have some fun in there. Non-coercive, period. Peer specialists will never utilize threat or force. We are not the people who says, I think this person needs to go to the hospital. I don't think they're safe right now. Unless someone's coming and using those exact words to us about themselves, we aren't there. But at OnTrackNY, that does not mean that we are not a part of the conversation. If a team is ever considering something, utilizing coercion or force or hospitalization or picking up the phone to call 911, we want the peer specialist in the room as a part of the conversation, because we need someone in the room saying, hey, this is what they want. Hey, this is what they said. Here is their advanced directive. Here is their on-track maps. Have we tried this? Are we doing this? Can we call them in? We are always trying to ensure that people are making their own decisions. And so non-coercive is an essential part of our job and is an essential element of what we bring to the team. Non-hierarchical, rejecting the hierarchy that we exist within. This one's complicated. We work in a very hierarchical system. We work in a team that is subject to the same hierarchy as the world. And so striving in our role to treat every voice as equally important, whether it's the psychiatric care provider, it's the parent, it's the best friend, it's ourselves, that we are really striving to hold all perspectives evenly and equally, and reject the idea that an opinion has more value because of who it came from. Okay, actually, I take it back. I think that okay, all of these are really fun rooms to be in. Have fun. Because the next one, oh, I love this part of the job. That not knowing gets a little bit more specific here. We are holding multiple perspectives about what is happening to someone outside of clinical and biomedical understandings. So that means that we are allowing people to define their mental health for themselves. They do not need to come to us and agree with their psychiatric label and see what is happening to them as an element of their mental health. We get to meet them and learn about their relationship with their higher power, the impact of the experiences they have that we might not, the things that they see that we do not, the things that they may hear that we do not, the perceptions they have that we may not. How do they understand it? What does it mean to you? And how do we get to hold that space for them? Oh, it's beautiful. And then lastly, these are relationships with individual people. They are going to look different. And we are going to try to meet every person where they are in the way that we can. And so questions about these themes, any, not questions about sort of how we do them, because those are the questions you're going to answer, but questions about what they mean. So it is 12:23. I'm going to give myself 2 minutes to figure out breakout rooms. So at 12:25, we will be in breakout rooms. We are going to go in for 15 minutes. So that means each person should have 2 to 4 minutes to share. So want to be thoughtful about hearing every voice in the breakout room. Your breakout room will be assigned as one of those themes. I want you all to go into the room and talk about how, one, as a peer specialist, this is how I do this work. If you are someone who holds the identity of a peer specialist in the room, and if you are someone who holds another team role, in my role, this is how I can support the peer specialist or how I can partner with the peer specialist as they do this work. And so I really want, so I'm calling in on our clinical colleagues today to think a little bit about the way that you support this, the way that you are showing up. If you have great things that peer specialists do that you've seen that you want to bring into the conversation too, that's okay, but don't like live there exclusively. We want to talk about how you're going to honor this too. Okay, any questions? Okay. So those of you who have to leave, we are glad to have you for as long as we did. That means the people in your breakout room get a little bit more time. So yay. I see someone has joined by phone. I just want to make you aware you are about to be sent into the focused on the individual relationships room because you will not be able to see that as you join. So with that, I'm going to open all rooms and I will see you back here at 12:40. Welcome back from your breakout rooms. Okay, so we just were in 7 rooms together talking through some of the themes of the work. We did not assign a note taker or anyone to report back, so that is, it's not a requirement that we hear from the different rooms, but I am curious, did anybody learn something or hear something really cool, or do we want to shout out another member who was in the breakout room for us who said something that we found to be like, I don't know, we're going to chew on it later. I just want to open it up. Any reactions or thoughts from your breakout rooms?
Absolutely. Hi, Abby, hi everyone. My name is Sherry, and I was in a room with Maria and Jessica, I believe, and something that Jessica said that stood out to me was like the relationship of the peer that's different from what a clinician's relationship is, and how we wouldn't recommend them going to the hospital or something like that, like you said. And I thought that was really important because I think we often have our own biases and belief systems that may affect how we listen to somebody. But I think to practice being present is one of my goals as a peer. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, no worries. Those of you who have to step out, we're glad to have you for whatever time we got you. So thank you. Any other reflections on the breakout room activities?
I think in ours, I was with Margaret, John, and Danielle. It was just like being at work, communicating with other people, all common. Do you know what I mean? We were on the same page, talking about different things. It was really, that's what I do on a daily basis. And presto.
Excellent. Cool.
I can add, I was in one of the dyads, so I've had a great one-on-one conversation. But one thing that we talked about that I think maybe applies to all of the groups is, the extent to which these, all of these values and things are very specific to the peer role, but in some ways can be embodied by everybody on the team, or at least understood by everybody on the team, in the same way that not everybody is an employment specialist, but can understand that person's goals with work and school and help them in their individual roles. Or not everybody is a psychiatrist, but can understand that person's needs with medication and kind of support them where that's concerned. And so like that, even though these are like peer roles, that they're helpful to everybody who is working with, the individuals on the team.
I appreciate that, Kelsey. And I hope so. That's really, I think that there's such variability in the ways that different people do this work in this, but the thing that called us all into work in this field is a desire to be of support to people. I think that's a universal thing that we all share, regardless of how we step into it. But in some ways, when you go through your training and credentialing process, a lot of that initial pull to the system, you learn things that at times feel like they're at odds with it, or that are pulling you in different directions. And so I often speak to the privilege of peer work, because I know exactly where I'm standing. I know exactly, like I know my values, I know my role. I can step in fully because while we absolutely have boundaries and ethics, like don't get me wrong, we do, they are different and they allow us to be really present in a cool way. So I think that I'll bring us back to like a question that some of you might have, which is like, how is talking about these values about integrating peer specialists? It's because to integrate peer specialists, you have to understand peer specialists. And you have to value peer specialists. And that's what these values really offer us, is a glimpse into what a peer specialist is bringing that, don't get me wrong, can feel really challenging sometimes. Can sometimes feel like it's making the process harder, or it's adding more time, or it's, oh God, she's in the room, I gotta watch what I have to say. Good. No, just kidding. But I think really thinking about this idea that like it is an essential part of the work that we are all hoping to do, is bringing in the voice of change agents, the voice of innovative disruptors. We have to disrupt. And that can feel uncomfortable, and we get that and we see that, and that's not a good reason to not have it happen. And so having spaces for open dialogue across roles, across disciplines, not specific to an individual we are supporting, is a really important part of integrating peer specialists. If you're only talking to us about a specific role, about a specific work, and you're not knowing more deeply the way that we are showing up, it's going to make it a lot harder. And so that is one element that I just want to celebrate. So in our final like 10 plus minutes together, we had some questions, some of which that we can answer fully, some of which that could be their own thing. So I am going to go up and sort of go through in chronological order, and I want to like call in all the peers and experts in this room to join me in our responses. So the very first one came up about peer specialists attending team meeting and balancing with clinical perspective. So we're going to start there. In OnTrack New York, every organization and agency is different in the way that it looks, but in OnTrack New York, it is essential that every team member be in the team meeting. So they are scheduled, even though we have like the nurse role is like 0.2, like we have limited FTE for certain roles, and it's still essential that we schedule the meeting at a time that every team member is available. And how do we balance the perspectives? By living in those values, by valuing all the perspectives, by saying, wow, we're hearing a lot from the clinical members on our team. Have we heard from the peer specialist? Do we have a structure of a team meeting that allows for every voice to be heard? Are we designating certain topics to when the peer specialist speaks up? Or are we having a free space? And this is where team leaders in the room, you all can back us in this. Call us in, make space for us. Don't always leave it to us. I remember I have such a visceral memory of being in team meeting and like sitting on the very edge of my seat, just like waiting for that person to take a breath that was long enough for me to insert myself. And it's so beautiful when someone else can say, hey, you work with this person, or I know this is how, and we can be called in. We'll call ourselves in too, but it's great when we don't have to. Margaret, please.
I was just wanting to understand the motivation for the question. Like, is there any reason one would think that wasn't a good idea?
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's what
Margaret, I asked the question and I can clarify. I think what happens is that there's a great deal of detail shared about the person's life, about clinical diagnoses, substances. I mean, you name it, it's very detailed in clinical rounds. And so I think it can then complicate at times the relationship when a peer may come in and try to be on even playing ground and get to know that person almost as a blank slate, but they already are coming in having known like what they ate for breakfast level of detail that was discussed in rounds. So that's where it's coming from.
Thank you for asking that question, Margaret. By the way, just sorry, I love a little bit more detail. But please, Amanda.
I think the other thing that I've heard is that some peers don't actually like to be a part of the team meeting because of all the medical model perspective that happens. Sure. And so, but I think I'm super curious about this though, because I think what you, Abby, were saying is that, sorry, I missed your introduction. Is that how you say your name? Okay. So Abby was saying is as though that like the values of what the themes of the values, I like love the idea of like, how do we integrate that into the team meeting? And if a peer is uncomfortable with all of this stuff, like, is it I just have so many questions. So here we are.
I'm going to put my email in the chat box as well so we can follow up. I like this. I live and breathe this stuff. I love talking about it. But I will just say there are coordinated specialty care teams and other places that utilize intentional peer support as it's intended to be. And I will just say the state of Maine is the one that I'm most aware of where this is not the practice. And so we're not here to say there's one way to do this, there's a right way to do this. Those practicing intentional peer support as it is intended choose to not engage with any of the clinical practice. At OnTrack New York, we really want this to be a part of every bit of the care. And so we've opted to go a different direction. And while intentional peer support very much informs a lot of our work, we do not align with it in the way that a peer specialist, it's like, we actually think that if a peer specialist is not at the team meeting, that the team meeting is not complete. And so I think it would be, we would offer TA and support to give people what they need so they feel comfortable being in that room, because that might be really good supervision. That might be really thoughtful ground rules about how we can do interruptions or how we can do planning. Like there's ways to support someone in feeling more comfortable. I don't want to deny that there's complications there, but for our model and our approach, we really require the peer specialist to be a part. They're an equal member of the team. They're a part of the team meeting. Please, Jacob, I see you.
Yeah, awesome. So I think part of this, at least in my experience, a part of it is also the culture of the workspace. And so like, somebody was saying, or I think you said, the team lead can help significantly with this. I was very fortunate when I came in for the peers that had worked in the role before me. They had set the groundwork, so I was never looked at any differently as part of the team. I was allowed to share, but I did have a responsibility to learn what and when to share, and what was relevant to the conversation. And so there was a balancing act that I had the opportunity, but I also had a balance. So one of the things that we've done in Idaho is we've done agency readiness for peers, informing them about peers and what their role is, how they interact. And I think you talked about this earlier, supervision for peers can be different. And so I think those are some of the pieces that will help navigate that team meeting a little more effectively for the peers, at least my experience.
I fully back that, and I'll admit in New York, and actually I feel like in Massachusetts too, we, in order to get a contract for an OnTrackNY New York team, like these are things that we are asking of, these are expectations of that contract. And so having that agency readiness, having that training for supervisors for agency leadership is a big part of it. I also just want to, if you're not in the chat box, be in the chat box. There's great stuff happening in here. And again, like we are not saying this is the way to do it. This is our model and approach to care. And so being really thoughtful that we celebrate the variety of ways that people step into peer support is not peer specialist work. It can't be. There's too much power in the room for it to be true peer support. True peer support are two people who find each other, who are just along with each other. Peer specialist work, there's many different ways to step into it that can honor the principles of peer support. And so I think being really thoughtful about what your agency, what your organization, what your personal preferences are, and the model of care that you are offering and how that fits in. Because I agree, I see some of the chat box about the only being in spaces where participants are. I love that. But I also think that sometimes things can be lost. And so if we get someone's permission to hold the perspective for them in the places they aren't, and to get their language, to get their understanding and advocate on behalf of them in those spaces, I think can also be really powerful. But again, it's not a right and wrong way. We're peer specialists, like we live in gray. There is no black and white, like there's never one answer. There's always a myriad of options. So I do just want to call that out. We are running out of time. So I will just do like turbo speed response. Cs and peer specialist split roles. Can you hold peer specialist values for all of them? I believe you can. But really, I think you can if you're also being a clinical provider. You can't hold those two values simultaneously. They do not fit together. They are two hats. You can wear one, you can wear the other. You can't wear them both. But I think if you're doing employment work from the perspective of a peer specialist, if you're building a peer specialist relationship with someone, even if you're also doing employment work, it is really important and valuable that you hold to the values of peer support, which means you are not telling someone what to do. You are not like setting the agenda. You're not saying like if you can live in those 7 values as you're doing employment and education support, then I think that that's how you hold those dual roles. Shay. Oh, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, my question is if you have the split role of being a peer specialist and a counselor for the program, how to balance that kind of.
That's a really tricky one. And I will admit, this is where I can't speak for the model. That is not a part of the OnTrackNY New York model. We hold exclusively to the role of peer specialist being peer specialist. So I would say that would be a really tricky conversation to have with your organization, with your supervisor. And I wish I could offer more support, but to be peer cannot coexist with the role of clinical provider. And so with that, let's not end on that. Hold on. So I will also just say I got a question about benefits. I would just highly recommend in New York State, we have what's called the Medicaid buy-in for working people with disabilities, which is a way that people can maintain benefits even while they're working. That's a really powerful resource for peer specialists who are on benefits, but also looking to increase their hours of work. I think all peer specialists should be greatly aware of entitlements, of how they are utilized, of how they are misutilized, and that we should call things what they are, which is to live a life on benefits is to live a life below the poverty line. and that peer specialists deserve more than that, and individuals who are psychiatrically labeled deserve more than that. For those of you who that it works for and it serves you, there is no judgment there. We love you, we see you, but we do not want that to be the expectation for this role. We want us to be paid more. We want us to, like, we can't talk about it without talking about it. And so I will just say that, and that will be the final thought before I kick it back to Kelsey. Thanks, y'all. It's been a pleasure. Send me an email if you want to talk more.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Abby. And for folks who are in our Massachusetts cohort who have not been joining our monthly calls, yeah, please let us know, and we're happy to join you and to add you to those as well. So just one housekeeping thing, we will send out a survey afterwards. Would love to get some feedback on the call. So keep an eye on your email for that. Ikra, if you can post that in the chat now too, just so folks have it. But yeah, thank you so much, Abby, and really great conversations today, everyone. So with that, enjoy the rest of your Friday. Thanks for joining us. And yeah.
You well, y'all. Thanks.